The date is September 25, 1987. In theaters across America, a fairy tale unlike any other begins to unfold. Rob Reiner's The Princess Bride opens to modest box office numbers, but within its storybook framework lies something extraordinary. A giant named Fezzik, played by a man who needs no special effects to tower over his co-stars. André the Giant, already a legend in the squared circle, transforms into something else entirely on that autumn Friday, a legitimate movie star. His performance is tender, funny, and deeply human. Children will quote his lines for generations. Critics will praise his warmth. And somewhere in the intersection between Vince McMahon's empire and Hollywood Boulevard, a door cracks open just wide enough to let the dream slip through. This wasn't just a movie role, it was validation. For decades, professional wrestlers had existed in America's cultural margins. Spectacular athletes and performers dismissed as carnies. Their craft reduced to fake fighting by those who couldn't see the artistry in the violence, the poetry in the pain. But André's appearance in The Princess Bride did something remarkable. It brought mainstream legitimacy not just to him, but to the entire World Wrestling Federation. If a wrestler could stand alongside Carrie Elwes and Mandy Patinkin in a film destined to become timeless, then perhaps wrestling itself deserved to be taken seriously. Perhaps its stars could transcend the canvas and folding chairs, trading body slams for box office gold. Wrestling has always had a complicated romance with Hollywood. Both industries traffic in larger-than-life personalities, choreographed spectacle, and the willing suspension of disbelief. Both create modern mythology. Yet Hollywood has always been the sophisticated older sibling, looking down at wrestling with a mixture of fascination and contempt. For wrestlers, conquering cinema meant something profound. It meant respectability, cultural permanence, escape from the brutal physical toll of their craft. It meant immortality of a different kind. Many wrestlers chased the bright lights of Hollywood. Most crashed and burned. A few found modest success in the margins. But only one truly conquered them. The flirtation began earlier than most remember. Long before the World Wrestling Federation became a cable television juggernaut, there was Lenny Montana, not technically a Federation wrestler, but a professional grappler nonetheless, who appeared in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather as Luca Brasi, the terrifying enforcer whose nervousness before meeting Don Corleone becomes one of cinema's most memorable scenes. Montana's wrestling background informed his physicality and his menace. Here was proof, albeit fleeting, that wrestlers could inhabit serious films. But Montana remained an anomaly, a curiosity. The path from ring to screen remained largely uncharted. Then came the 1980s, and with it, Hulkamania. But before Hulk Hogan exploded into American consciousness through Saturday morning wrestling broadcasts, he was featured in Sylvester Stallone's Rocky III in 1982. As Thunderlips, the ultimate male, Hogan brought his golden charisma and impossible physique to a charity boxing match against Rocky Balboa himself. The role was brief, almost comically over the top, but it worked. Hogan's natural screen presence was undeniable. Audiences loved him, and Hollywood took notice. What followed was a cautionary tale about the difference between charisma and cinema. Hogan's subsequent film career became a parade of increasingly desperate B-movies. No Holds Barred, a vanity project produced in collaboration with Vince McMahon himself that felt less like a movie and more like extended Federation programming with a theatrical budget. Suburban Commando, where the Hulkster played a bumbling alien warrior adjusting to suburban life with all the subtlety of a leg drop. And Mr. Nanny, which asked audiences to believe this mountain of muscle as a gentle caretaker to small children, complete with pratfalls and baby powder. Each film performed worse than the last at the box office. Each reinforced Hollywood's skepticism that wrestling stars were anything more than curiosities, carnival attractions who couldn't carry a proper film. Hogan had everything you could ask for. The look, the name recognition, the cultural footprint that made him recognizable in every corner of America. But his movies were forgettable, increasingly direct-to-video curiosities that did nothing to establish wrestlers as legitimate actors. If anything, they set the cause back. The dream was faltering before it had truly begun, and Hollywood's executives were taking notes. Yet while Hogan floundered in lead roles, Jesse the Body Ventura discovered something valuable. Wrestlers could thrive as character actors in the right projects, alongside the right stars. In 1987, the same year André enchanted audiences as Fezzik, Ventura appeared alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator as Blaine Cooper, the tobacco-chewing, minigun-wielding Special Forces operative whose death becomes one of the film's most memorable moments. Ventura was perfect for the role, imposing, quotable, completely believable in the testosterone-soaked jungle warfare that defined 80s action cinema. His delivery of "I ain't got time to bleed" became instantly iconic. He followed this with The Running Man, another Schwarzenegger vehicle where he played Captain Freedom, a gladiator in a dystopian game show, cementing his status as a reliable supporting player in the action genre. Ventura never became a star in his own right, never carried a film on his shoulders, but he contributed meaningfully to some of the decade's most iconic action films. He understood his lane and stayed in it, earning genuine respect from directors and fellow actors rather than chasing the impossible dream of solo stardom. In some ways, Ventura succeeded precisely because he didn't overreach. Roddy Piper took a different path entirely. In John Carpenter's 1988 cult masterpiece They Live, Piper delivered a performance that remains startling in its effectiveness, revealing depths that few suspected existed beneath the wrestling persona. As John Nader, a drifter who discovers humanity is being controlled by alien overlords through subliminal messaging, Piper brought working-class authenticity and genuine rage to the role. There's nothing cartoonish about his performance. It's grounded, weary, and deeply human. The film's famous alley fight scene, 6 minutes of brutal, unglamorous violence between Piper and Keith David over a pair of sunglasses, plays like a wrestling match elevated to art, every punch and throw feeling devastatingly real. Piper could act. The critics acknowledged it. Audiences loved the film, even if it didn't perform spectacularly in theaters. But Hollywood didn't come calling with bigger opportunities, with leading man roles or franchise considerations. Eventually, inevitably, Piper returned to what he knew best: the ring, the promos, the controlled chaos of professional wrestling. The industry had given him one perfect role, one moment to prove himself, and then forgotten him entirely. It was a pattern that would repeat itself again and again. Others tried and vanished almost immediately. Big John Studd appeared in Harley-Davidson and the Marlboro Man, a motorcycle action flick that aimed for cult status and achieved only obscurity. Terry Funk, a legitimate wrestling legend, showed up in Roadhouse alongside Patrick Swayze, playing an older fighter with weathered credibility. A glimpse of what wrestlers could bring to cinema when properly deployed, but again, it led nowhere. The industry seemed to have a use for wrestlers as novelties, as physical presences in action ensembles, but never as actual stars. Tommy "Tiny" Lister, known in Federation storylines as Zeus, blurred the lines between wrestling and film in No Holds Barred, essentially playing his wrestling character opposite Hogan's wrestling character in what could barely be called a movie. Lister, however, would go on to carve out a genuine acting career, most memorably as the intimidating Debo in Friday, proving that sometimes the path from wrestling to Hollywood success required leaving the wrestling connection behind entirely. Randy Savage, Macho Man himself, appeared in the dismal wrestling comedy Ready to Rumble, but found unexpected immortality in a single scene from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man as Bonesaw McGraw, a cage fighter who battles Tobey Maguire's newly powered hero. That 3-minute cameo, with its perfect recreation of wrestling's theatrical excess, perhaps did more for Savage's film legacy than any starring role could have. The new generation of wrestlers continued the pattern. Triple H tried his hand at action films with the forgettable Inside Out. Kevin Nash accumulated supporting roles in The Punisher, Magic Mike, and even John Wick, always competent, never remarkable. Stone Cold Steve Austin starred in The Condemned and a parade of direct-to-video action thrillers, his genuine toughness translating poorly to scripted violence. John Cena came next, more self-aware and strategic, embracing comedy, leaning into irony, and finding moderate success not by rejecting his wrestling image, but by reinventing it. They all had the physicality, the name recognition, and the fan base, but none of it mattered. Hollywood had judged wrestling's offerings and found them wanting. And then, finally, improbably, came The Rock. Dwayne Johnson understood something his predecessors didn't, something fundamental about the nature of Hollywood stardom. The industry didn't want wrestlers pretending to be actors. It wanted movie stars who happened to have wrestled. Johnson's breakthrough in The Scorpion King wasn't just about charisma or physique, though he had both in overwhelming abundance. It was about his willingness to be vulnerable, funny, self-deprecating in ways that previous wrestlers never allowed themselves to be. He could mock his own masculinity while embodying it completely. He could anchor family comedies like The Game Plan and massive action franchises like Fast and Furious with equal skill, moving seamlessly between genres that would have destroyed lesser talents. Most importantly, Johnson studied the craft with monastic dedication. He trained with acting coaches, analyzed performances, chose projects strategically rather than simply taking whatever came his way. He worked on his timing, his emotional range, his ability to carry scenes through subtlety rather than just physical presence. And crucially, he didn't cling desperately to his wrestling persona the way Hogan had. He didn't need audiences to remember The Rock's catchphrases or finishing moves. He evolved beyond his origins, transforming himself into something entirely new while acknowledging where he came from. Johnson became what every wrestler since André had dreamed of becoming, a genuine A-list movie star, commanding $20 million paychecks, opening films worldwide, transcending his origins completely. He proved it was possible, and in doing so, he revealed just how rare true crossover success really is. Perhaps Dave Bautista, appearing in Guardians of the Galaxy and Denis Villeneuve's Dune, represents a modern echo of Johnson's achievement, proof that the path exists, but also a reminder of how few can walk it. Bautista brings genuine depth to his performances, but even he operates in The Rock's long shadow. Wrestling has always wanted Hollywood's validation. It craved the legitimacy that cinema could confer, the cultural permanence of cinema, rather than the ephemeral spectacle of weekly television. But perhaps the greatest performances happened in the ring all along. Perhaps Hulk Hogan's legendary slam of André the Giant at WrestleMania 3 was more cinematic than anything he did for cameras. Perhaps Roddy Piper's promos showed more range than they live ever allowed. Perhaps Randy Savage's wedding to Miss Elizabeth was more emotionally resonant than his entire film career. The wrestlers tried. Most failed. One succeeded beyond imagination. But in the end, they were already stars, just not the kind Hollywood was willing to recognize.